Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this Connect University session on submarine cables and international connectivity. I am Raquel Civitareale, and I will be moderating this session. It is the third session, of a series on CEF Digital. It follows that of the 19th of February, which gave a general overview on the CEF Digital program, and that of the 14th of March, which focused on 5G deployment rather. So just to give a little background on the Connect University sessions in general. So it is a knowledge sharing flagship initiative of DG Connect, which aims to update both the EU staff and the general public about the latest digital trends, as well as the most important digital policies. So normally all of you are connected via Slido, I hope. Please know that you can ask your questions there and we will make sure that they make their way to the speakers at the end of the session. We will also make sure to make the recording available as of next week on the Digital EU channel on YouTube and the slides on the Futurium platforms. And of course, links will be added in the chat. So for your information, we will have one more and last session on CEF Digital on the 11th of June. It wasn't envisaged, but it was at the demand of the audience. It will cover 5G again, but this time from an expert's perspective. So keep following us for the next session. Now we'll quickly introduce our speakers before leaving the floor to our first one. So today we'll be in the presence of first Franco Accordino, Head of Unit B5, which focuses on investment in high capacity networks at DG Connect. Sorry for not mentioning that. Then we'll have Georgios Tselentis, Policy Officer in the same unit, so Unit B5 at DG Connect. Then we will have Karina Marcus, Project Advisor at the European Health and Digital Executive Agency, ADEA, followed by Peter Curran, I hope I didn't pronounce it wrong, Policy Officer in DG INPA, Unit F5, so responsible for science, technology, innovation, and digitalization. Then Ramunas Linartas, Policy Analyst, Unit G1 in DG Regio, responsible for smart and sustainable growth. And finally, Eva Zandonella, Policy Coordinator of Unit A1, responsible for outermost regions in DG Regio as well. So now we'll leave the floor to Franco Accordino for the introduction on CEF Digital. Franco, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Raquel, and welcome everyone. So I understand there are quite a lot of participants to this session. And it will be a pleasure this time to share this fresh knowledge about CEF Digital, but also about submarine cable and backbone connectivity together with the other colleagues of the other relevant DGs, and namely DG Regio and the DG International Partnership, with whom we work on a daily basis on this subject. Next slide, please. Yes, so let me contextualize a bit backbone connectivity in a broader policy context. So connectivity is really indeed essential for the overall digital transition for several reasons. First of all, it is fundamental to include everyone in the digital transition. Actually, it stems a little bit from the ubiquitous character of our connectivity target set for the end of the decade. So I recall them briefly, ensuring that 100% of European households are connected with the gigabit connectivity, and ensuring that all populated areas of the Union are covered by 5G, appropriate level of quality of 5G. So those are really quite challenging because, as I said, these 100%, this means that even the most remote area, and in particular, even the most remote islands of the Union, has to be connected, because you might have a 5G in a small island, you might have a fiber in a small island, but if this island is not properly connected with the right backbone to the mainland and to the rest of the internet, of course, you don't appreciate the benefit of having such a great quality speed locally. So not only access networks, but also backbone networks have to have the right level of quality and performance, security, resilience, etc. So, but not only connectivity is important for inclusiveness, but also for competitiveness, keywords that you might have heard more and more frequently in the last few months. There have been notable reports on competitiveness. There will be, certainly. Because yes, indeed, we suffer the competition of other regions the competitiveness of other regions in the world concerning the overall digital value chain. And we firmly believe that deploying a backbone network, deploying in general connectivity infrastructure, brings new opportunity for the whole digital value chain to unleash its potential and to compete globally. In other words, there is it's difficult to imagine at a competitive Europe in digital without having the proper level of connectivity. So it's important to boost innovation via the digitalization of verticals, so meaning hospitals, schools, via the connectivity, they can really innovate, but only with the condition that when we deploy the cable, when we deploy the 5G infrastructure, we bundle it with the take-up. So yes, I have a top of the speed, top of the quality 5G standalone system, but I use it for this, the other one use case, specific application that requires that type of connectivity. So, but also because with this new level of, scaling up the performance of the connectivity, you can always imagine and put in practice new business models that go beyond the consumer-centric business model we are used to. Going beyond selling the connectivity, but around the connectivity, you provide also to your customers or your business customers services that, of course, require specific minimal level of quality of the connectivity, but also require specific capacities like edge cloud. So the bundling of the connectivity to other digital capacities becomes also very important. This is exactly what we are telling in the white paper on the future of connectivity needs for the Union, where we stress really the importance of establishing a connected, collaborative computing continuum. So not only looking at the deployment of the cable, but looking at the deployment of that cable together with the necessary computing and data processing, AI capacities, et cetera, et cetera. So focus is no longer on one individual segment, but on the overall digital value chain. So this is very important for the future of the Union. But of course, it is also very important that these infrastructures, being them again wireless 5G or being them submarine cables, they are deployed with the necessary security and resilience stamp, let's say, that they are really foolproof secure, that we can rely on them. And in case there will be any, discontinuity for whatever reason, then we will be able still to be online because there is some level of redundancy or some level of resilience. So, and last but not least, of course, connectivity is important not only for the digital transition, but also via the connectivity, we can put forward our green transition agenda. We will see for sure plenty of examples in the next speeches. Next slide, please. I will be a bit faster, I promise, Raquel. So I was just mentioning, that connectivity is essential not only for the sake of achieving the digital connectivity target that are in the first layer in red that you see on the slide, where we mentioned, 5G coverage, fiber to the home, fixed very high capacity network connectivity. It's also important for the other targets, the cardinal points of the digital decade agenda that we have there. I can't imagine having, cloud take up without proper connectivity, right? So just to give you an example. So the message I want to bring here is just that the backbones are not explicitly mentioned here, but they are really essential for all the targets. That's the reason why this session will focus on the backbones, in particular on submarine cables. That's very important. And not only, as mentioned, the example that I mentioned earlier in connecting the islands, but also because the Union as a whole, including the mainland, if it's isolated, if it's not properly connected with the third countries, let's say, networks in a proper manner, then of course that is not good as well. So that's the reason why we need to put some additional focus on the connectivity also with the third countries. Next slide, please. Yes, so what we do concretely, I'm a little bit speaking with my heads of unit in investment in high capacity networks. Yes, indeed, we manage directly with the help of our colleagues in the executive agency ADEA, the CEF Digital program, which is an envelope of 2 billion dedicated to connectivity. But of course, we are not alone. You must know that overall, the level of amount of public spending in the Union in the years in the current MFF is in the order of 40 billions. Of which, let's say, 16 billion national investments and 23.5 or 24 billion from European Union programs. Now, from the slide, you can see that the Union programs, okay, there are the programs like CEF that are directly managed by us. They do not constitute, by definition, state aid because they are designed in a way that they are consistent with the state aid framework. But there are programs that, even if they are European programs, like the ERDF, and Eva is there to elaborate on that. The ERDF is a shared management program, but of course, because the ultimate decision on the individual projects is up to the member states or the region or whatever, then these might constitute state aid, so might require notifications. The same for the EAFRD. But of course, otherwise, the NDICI program, and the colleague from IMPA will explain, they are not, of course, they do not constitute state aid in general, but of course, they have to be consistent with state aid rules. The same for Next Generation EU. This might constitute state aid. The member states' investments, by definition, might constitute state aid. Of course, the private investment, they by definition are not state aid. They should be, let's say, the dominant part in the overall investment needed to fulfill the connectivity targets. In the last year, we made an estimation of how much is needed to fill in this connectivity, to achieve the connectivity targets. We identified a gap of around 200 billions, but there we need to put together, of course, all type of networks that allow us to achieve the targets. Of course, we need to be tech neutral, of course, in doing this, but the gap is that one is huge, it's 200 billion. Therefore, we need to use the CEF, for what we are concerned as a unit, in a way that is, let's say, yes, that contributes directly to these targets, of course, but at the same time, we use it for achieving more than that, because if you imagine 2 billion is a fragment of what is 200 billion gap. So we need to use it in a clever manner in order to generate the necessary spillovers and the necessary, let's say, viral force. That, of course, what we do at the European level with the CEF, we promote a certain type of 5G connectivity. This is then later on taken up and multiplied, so a multiplication effect I was referring to, that is necessary to achieve impact beyond the envelope of the 2 billion that we have there. Next slide, please. So the CEF indeed is not entirely devoted to submarine cable, I have to say. There we have two main strengths. We have a 5G envelope where we support 5G corridors and 5G smart communities. Rachele mentioned that there will be dedicated sessions on that. We have already had some discussions in earlier Connect University sessions, so we will insist on that, of course. But what is more important and gaining momentum is the connectivity for backbones, and this includes a number of connectivity, backbone connectivity. Backbone, we speak about backbone when we connect large regions, or we connect, of course, digital capacity that are by definition geographically dispersed on a large say, geographical area, like cloud, for instance. So today, as we said, we focus really on the digital global gateways, which includes, of course, the submarine cables. Next slide, please. Yes, so the overall goal with this is, of course, to build a smart, performant, and resilient EU backbone infrastructure that ensures sovereignty on critical EU assets and reinforce the EU footprint in the global context. I already said this objective in 2 lines summarizes what I already said earlier. What is important is the keyword sovereignty here. What does it mean? It doesn't mean that we are really isolating ourselves. On the contrary, we really want to open ourselves to the other regions. But we really want to transform the Union into an international hub For this to happen, of course, not only we need the proper level of connectivity with the proper amount of cables with the related resilience and redundancy, but we also need to apply the proper security checks, because those cables have to comply with the European rules, which for sure guarantee, let's say, that our data stay always safe, protected, and our rights as individuals or as enterprises are always respected. So in particular, we also aim to strengthen the intra-EU, but also connection with the third countries connectivity. We really want to maximize the synergy with other programs like NDICI, the instrument for pre-accession for the more neighbored countries, and of course with the RDF. And the presence, of course, of the colleagues from the other DGs in these sessions is a proof of that. Then we also want to strengthen the collaboration with the national banks institution, with the IB, with the private investor, and that's the reason why we have a blended operations and financial instrument encoded into the CEF as a possible implementing mode. Then, of course, I stress the ownership and controllership of the critical infrastructures like cables, but of course of the supply chain, which is fundamental. And of course, we promote the state-of-the-art technologies and also, let's say, methodologies to protect the cables, but also to use the cables for more than just connectivity per se, but also, for instance, to monitor the environment, the oceans, status of oceans. Also, why not also for security purposes? Next slide. So we are walking the talk. We have already had two call for proposal in the first work program covering years 2021-23. We are evaluating a third call in this moment, but you can see that our portfolio of project is growing. You might remember 1 year ago when we had the first Connect University session, we had only the blue and the green ones. Now we have the yellow ones there, and we will have soon a new color. I hope as soon as possible. So far, we have spent 277 millions in terms of commitment for a total of 30 projects. And they cover, of course, also the outermost regions and overseas countries and territories. Of course, other colleagues will elaborate on that. And we have really a wide coverage, not only limited to the mainland of the Union, but also to other let's say, regions, especially where our outermost regions and overseas countries and territories are present. Next slide, please. Account, of course, the other colleagues will elaborate on that in the next presentation. So I take it really a few words. And on these, I want to say, just to show that so far, if we include also call 3, we include the call 3, let's say, as the budget allocated in the call, we reach already on submarine cables and global gateways in general 408 million, which is a quite consistent amount. But I can tell you that I cannot reveal you the exact numbers because we are still discussing internally to the Commission the next work program 2024-2027. But I can tell you that certainly the global gateway submarine cables will continue to be really very much supported. And this is in line also with what we wrote in the white paper, as I said, and also on the recommendation on the security and resilience of submarine cables, which goes hand in hand with the white paper that I mentioned earlier, and which I invite everyone to read. I will not insist too much on this because it's better really to download and read these recommendations. But there are also other sessions we could envisage dedicated to that. But next slide, please. This is basically what I said. So reinforcement of not only deployment, but reinforcing also the research and innovation activities on new fiber and cable technologies, trying to set up a joint EU governance system for submarine cable infrastructures. So in particular, we aim really with this recommendation to set up an expert group that would identify together with the member states in a pretty bottom-up level, so telling first the member states what their needs are in terms of resilience for backbones. Because this might not necessarily be a submarine cable, it could also be a terrestrial link. But essentially, once the member states identify their gaps, also in collaboration with the NIS2, because this is very much about security also as well, resilience, then we bring all this information together and we identify the gaps. And then this will be our, let's say, guiding input for the allocation also of the priorities in the various programs. So we think also, yes, we aim to have an harmonized security requirement in international fora and potentially dedicated EU certification scheme for what is indeed a secure cable. We really also try to push, let's say, in the future, the possibility to streamline things like the permit granting, etc., etc. Possibility to do a delegated act for the Connecting Europe facility to amend Annex Part 5 to have let's say, a list of indicative project of common interest, which in the case of cable, we call cable project of European interest. And of course, to review the available funding of financial instrument, because really, if this is recognized to be a priority, of course, we need to cater for possible, support and bold support to this infrastructure. Next slide. Okay, it's a thank you. It's thank you to all of you for listening to this brief introduction. I think now the deep dive will come from the colleagues. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Franco, for the introduction. And for those who joined in a bit later, know that if you're connected via Slido, you can ask your questions there, and we will make sure that they make their way to the speakers at the end of the session. So now, after this, as you said, Franco, brief introduction on CEF Digital, we'll move into the next part of our presentation on EU connectivity. And this time we'll speak about what is happening today in terms of backbones worldwide and especially in the EU. And this will be covered by my colleague Yorgos Tselentis. So Yorgos, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Raquel. I hope you can see me and hear me well. Thank you for having me in this Connect University. With the first slide, please. I try to give an overall picture of how our world is connected. You can see that predominantly we are talking about backbone connections which are going through the sea. That's why in the rest of the presentation you will see the focus that we have in the submarine cables. That doesn't mean that there are not connections that are happening that are terrestrial or even through satellite. But the importance of this submarine connections is not, it was not, I think, fully emerging on the surface until we understood how critical this infrastructure is. And I'm referring to some incidents that happened recently, but also about the tensions that are happening in our neighborhood, the war in Ukraine, and also the conflict in the Middle East. Please, the next slide. So we always wanted to connect. And this, let's go back in history, in 150 years or more, where we have the telegraph as the first mean of long distance communication, and we have Samuel Morse, one of the inventors of the telegraph, that was thinking that's a very good idea to connect the two sides of the Atlantic Ocean, so between America and Europe. And he actually tested this idea in the New York Harbor. And the first actually commercial cable was across the East River in New York some years later. This idea, so we are talking about something which is, if you see it and compare it to the current connections, is copper in rubber, sealed by Indian rubber, as they called it that time. And the first attempt was finally made around 1854, and it was connecting the west coast of Ireland to the America. And again, this was a test which led to the first communications around 1858. Since then, and mainly for serving the purpose of telephony, we had several cables that were going transatlantic. This is still today one of the most busy routes for communication. And the technological jump happened with the first fiber optic system, the TAT8, which became operational at the late 80s. Still at the time, we were talking about telephone circuits if we wanted to measure capacity, and it was connecting the United States, UK, and France. So mainly now, I mean, practically we have fiber optic cables that are used in our backbones, be it terrestrial or submarine, and this is the way our communication network over the planet is working. In the next slide, please. We talk now about submarine cables because the vast majority of the data which is flowing worldwide is flowing through those submarine cables. There are misconceptions that we are using satellites or terrestrial cables, but this is mainly through the sea. We are talking about something like 1.4 million kilometers in total that is laid in the ocean and the seas. And this deployment of infrastructure is following the increase of needs for capacity. So lately, if we are talking about the capacity in the transatlantic route that I told you, and you can see on the picture that this is one of where you have many cables crossing, is reaching more than 13% growth rates. And some projections say that it will reach 75 increase in capacity by 2025. Overall, this is a very important industry with more than 20 billion dollars investments between the last 3 years. And we are talking about deployment of more than 670,000 kilometers laid in the last decade. So these are the statistics to show you that not only we are talking about the big chunk of backbone networks that are with the submarine cables, but also that the trend is upwards about the capacity and the needs. Next slide, please. The capacity, as I said, it was calculated in the old days with circuits. So actually, if you have the images of the operators that were changing the circuits, this is the very early days. But later on, the technological evolution and mainly the fiber and the internet and the voice over IP changed also the way we were designing capacity. Initially, we were saying how many customers we are expecting, and therefore we could see the capacity here is a little bit more complicated. The way we go for maximum capacity, we have fibers that are weighted to be to have laser beams activated. So we have dark fiber waiting to be lit for providing capacity. But when we design the networks, we go for what we call maximum capacity. At the same time, we have technological trends like artificial intelligence, which is and quantum computing, which are dealing with a huge amount of data that need to be processed and go to data centers. And this shifts the needs for capacity and demand in higher scales. At the same time, this is becoming critical. Backbones are critical, considered as critical infrastructure. And there is a design for resilience, which is adding further capacity just in case there is a cable which is cut, just in case there is a route which is obstructed. And last but not least, we have unforeseen events. The most recent is the COVID pandemic, which changed the way that we are operating and we are using the internet. And therefore, there is a change of, and this has to do with also the location. More people are working from home or from distance, and this is changing the patterns and the capacity needs. This infrastructure is not an infrastructure that we can easily put in the bottom of the ocean and change it the next day. It's designed to have an estimated lifetime of more than 20 years. And in some cases, we are having this infrastructure prolonging their useful lifetime with technological advancements in the landing stations or in the technologies that we are using. So we are doing what we can in order to prolong the life, but needless to say that because the needs are exponentially increasing, we have also the need to deploy more and more cables. There is an issue also with the decommissioned cables that we need to take care of, like the ones that the similar problem that we have with space debris that is orbiting around us. So we are putting cables that are staying there in the bottom of the ocean, and we need to decommission them and recycle them. And countries are becoming more and more aware about that. Next slide, please. This infrastructure, in order to be put in the right place, needs some very specialized companies, which are the stakeholders. The stakeholders is not that are used for this industry are well known, and they are the ones that are leading the deployment of the backbones. We have the chance to have a market leader, Alcatel Submarine Networks. We have also United States have also Subcom, NECs from Japan, Huawei Marine Networks and from China. And these are the big players that, if we're talking particularly about the backbones that are in the oceans, transatlantic or transpacific, these are the ones who are going to lay the cable. In order to do so, they use specialized ships for installing them, but also in case there is a damage to repair. This is one also very important asset for the industry. It's also one of the bottlenecks for the deployment, because those ships, as they are specialized, they need not to have many days in dry dock just in case they are going to be used. So when you need to deploy a cable or when you need to repair a cable, you have to go and check the long list of operations that are in the log of those ships in order to find the right opportunity to do so. So this is an issue also that we are looking at and see how can we assure that if we have backbones in need of repair, or if we need to install backbones particularly in Europe, that we have the capacity for the specialized ships to do so. Next slide, please. Around less than 8 years ago, there was a big shift in the industry. We have the so-called hyperscalers. We have the Amazon, Facebook, Google, and Microsoft. which in the past were used to be of the vehicles. So typically, what was happening before this change, this shift, was that telecom operators were making an alliance. If we are talking about a big cable, they were buying capacity in order to serve their customers, which were the hyperscalers. The hyperscalers shifted the model in the sense that from purchasing capacity, they were the ones behind owning their own cables, and has still, we are on the, these are the new kids in the block, and we are in a shift of the market as well. They have the necessary liquidity that is allowing to do so. So they go for a system of cell phone systems instead of having equity or loans of banks or financial institutions. At the same time, they are spearheading innovation, and they are changing also the model about the geolocation of where those cables are landing. So instead of going from a city or to city like London or to New York, we are talking about where is the nearest data center to data center, for obvious reasons. So the hyperscalers' capacity demand was the one that was growing exponentially and became out of proportion, challenged the telcos to provide the whole needed capacity. And so the old model became inefficient. That's what pushed the hyperscalers to go into this market. And as we see the trends, we are expecting that the hyperscalers are expected to account for an increasing portion of the systems that they are owned. At the same time, they are looking at the markets which are emerging, like in the area of Africa, and they're making bids which are very competitive for the telcos. Also, we have also the competition on the construction of those cables from Asia, in particular the Huawei Submarine networks systems. So this is an industry which is highly competitive if we are looking about the market needs. Next slide, please. So as I said, the hyperscalers changed the game. This is something that is more and more in need, is to connect data centers with backbones, in particular submarine cables. So in the design of where to connect, so not only with how much capacity, one needs to strategically choose the landing station in order to optimize interconnection. If we have data that are crossing, for example, the continent, the ideal strategy is that you cache it in a data center closer to the end user. So this creates a vicious cycle where landings with many interconnections are attractive for further interconnections. And if you see the map again and the detail about in Europe, Marseille, you see that this is what led Marseille to have now 14, or maybe I didn't count well, or at least 14 cables landing there. So these interconnections are also very important and essential for resilience, but at the same time, they are posing a threat in case of attacks or for as there are choke points. Another famous choke point is in Suez, where all the connection between Europe and Asia is passing through. However, we have again technology that is trying to keep the pace and improve. We have also agreements that are taking place, and the is overall to have network efficiency, connect with low latency as fast as possible to any place in the world. Next slide, please. Now, I will, because we are talking about the backbones, just a couple of slides about the technology. If we are talking about submarine cables, most people are surprised to see that we are talking about all the communication passing through fibers that are not, I mean, the core of this cable, which is the fibers, the orange part, is something like less than 2 centimeters of diameter. And the rest is insulation, is the necessary metal to provide the electricity which is needed for the repeaters, because the signal is attenuated after some distance. And of course, there is armor, or sometimes double armor, of this cable, which is from steel mainly. And the purpose is to try to avoid that the cable is cut, because mainly those cables are cut from human activities, trawlers that are doing fishing. At the same time, there are sometimes natural disasters, or there are again or ocean currents, or an anchor that is drifted. And there is, of course, natural wear and tear, because they're operating, as I said, in harsh environments. The pressure is huge in some cases. I mean, the pressure is 1 atmosphere in every 10 meters. So you can have cables that are in depths of 2,000 meters or more. There are new technologies like hollow core that are trying to improve the efficiency of the capacity. We are trying to put more fiber pairs if possible. We are trying to solve the problem with the repeaters. So these are all technological, on the technological front improvements that will lead the industry to improve again capacity and performance. I can give you an anecdote. Recently, there was the ship in the Red Sea where it was attacked by the Houthi rebels. It was half sunk for several days with its anchor half floating in a certain depth, and we believe that this was the cause of dragging and probably destroying some of the cables that are passing in this corridor, and having as an impact connectivity obstruction for more than 6 African countries. So you can see how small how limited is in the pipe of where the data flows, and how vulnerable can be in case of those problems. The next slide. Sorry, I was talking about this. I think Raquel, please. Yes. Sorry. There's a delay for what I see. Can you put, please, the slide with the smart cables? It's the previous one. Thank you. What happens is that with the cables, primarily we We connect to A to B for data flow, but recently we use the cables since they are in areas that are very difficult to observe. We attach sensors that can be sensors for pressure, for temperature, for whatever you can imagine, for salinity. And this gives a very, very good opportunity for the scientific community to observe and monitor whatever the sensors can sense. There is a second main category of transforming those cables into smarts, because the laser beam which is inside the cables, when it moves for waves or other types of waves that can make displacement, like earthquakes, you can detect this in the two sides of the cable. So this gives an opportunity to have two or more in the price of one. You can have a submarine cable that is transmitting data, and at the same time a monitoring system that can give you information about, or can be a part, for example, for an early warning system for earthquakes or volcanic eruptions or tsunamis. It can protect even the own infrastructure, because it's so sensitive that can detect if somebody is approaching or somebody is trying to destroy the cable. It can monitor the traffic. It can do many things. So this is obviously an area with great potential. At the same time, is a very sensitive area, because we are talking about cables that are laid in the bottom of the sea and not necessarily in the jurisdictional area of the ones that are connected or the ones that laid the cable. At the same time, as I said, we are living in a changing world where the protection of critical infrastructure is of prime importance. So smart cables can be one way to protect the infrastructure. Next slide, please. So let's see a little bit what we do with CEF and in general in the Commission about this. So we try to see, as I put again, the map of what is happening in this infrastructure. We recognize that this is it's a critical infrastructure that we need to take care of. I mean, we don't want to have Europe isolated or have problems of connectivity, and we need to foresee how we do that. At the same time, we have overseas countries and territories which are far from the European mainland, or we need to connect with our like-minded countries and business partners all over the world. So this needs a very, very thorough analysis about what is happening now, what might happen in the future, and how we want to drive our infrastructure program in order to serve all these targets. And next slide, please. So as I say, I think Franco mentioned some of those. We are trying to be present also where the standards and rules are, build partnerships with the main actors, and particularly the European ones. We want to say where we are going to do the investments for the future. We need to see what do we do and how do we cooperate and how we govern all the systems, because this is interconnected infrastructure. And we want at the same time to give an emphasis in the secure connectivity, which I will dive very quickly because I'm cognizant of the time. Next slide, please. So by secure connectivity, we talk about secure communications and resilience of terrestrial, submarine, and satellite communications. Important for Europe and for some nations that are for submarine connectivity is their only digital lifeline to the rest of the world, like Cyprus Island and Malta. We have the recent incidents that I mentioned, the war of aggression from Ukraine, from Russia against Ukraine, and also the conflict in the Middle East. There, I think we need to see this in a completely different mindset. Next slide, please. I can say what happened very quickly in 2022. We had the Universe Call in March 22, where we recognized the importance of critical infrastructure. We had President von der Leyen with which presented a 5-point plan. We had the conclusions of the Council on May 22, and then which requested risk evaluations and scenarios. We had the recommendation, which was mentioned also by Franco. And next slide, 23. So in the last couple of years, you can see many of those issues that were taking high political level. Also regarding the digital decade report in 23. We collaborate also the EU with the NATO task force on the critical undersea infrastructure coordination cell. And last but not least, the Commission procured studies and we consulted the relevant stakeholders. We are now looking at things like the mapping, the assessment of risk and vulnerabilities and dependencies. The issues, as I said, about the repair and maintenance and the lack of ships, that's another point. And the foremost, where can we put our money in the future that makes sense in terms of critical infrastructures? Next slide, please. With the CEF goals, and I think the next speaker will give you how this led, what were the results. We tried following what was in the regulation to connect the territories and the outermost regions, tried to see again the problem of the islands in particular and the member states which are islands and how they are having a good connectivity. We wanted to ensure connectivity with international interlocutors and partners. And we wanted also to do this on the basis of an EU strategic autonomy. And we want to promote the synergy also with other CEF Digital sectors like the high performance computing and cloud. Next slide. So when we intervene primarily when there is a lack of redundancy or the existing infrastructure cannot satisfy the demand. There is a market failure, which can be also be seen that by the fact that the users are not having the adequate services and prices. As it is, I mentioned the importance of security, and there are several issues that we have put in our calls. Most important is that we exclude non-EU controlled entities unless we want to connect with third countries, and these entities are necessary for the execution of the project. Next slide, please. And I need to remind again, although we every time we focus on the submarine cables, and I gave you the rationale why we do so, our call is technology neutral. We can also co-fund satellite infrastructures and connectivity to other backbones and internet exchange points. We have two main categories of types of projects. The one is for works, where it's actually the deploying of the infrastructure. And of course, we don't fund the operating costs. But before that, also, we fund studies for all the necessary preparatory work. We can also have calls where we combine those two works, having also studies as a part of the project. And next slide, I think maybe is my last. It was my last slide, and I think I can pass the floor to you, Raquel, for Karina, to say what we did so far.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much, Yorgos. We took a bit more time than anticipated, but hopefully we make it till the end of the session. So now we will, as you said, Yorgos, look a bit into the CEF portfolio for Call 1 and Call 2 projects, Union international projects more precisely. I leave the floor to you, Karina.
Okay. Thank you very much for this invitation. As Franco Codino mentioned at the beginning, I work in the European Health and Digital Executive Agency, so HADEA, that is responsible for the implementation of everything that my colleagues mentioned before. Next slide, please. So, of course, we're not going to go through all the different projects. We just wanted to show you a little bit what has been, some examples of what has been funded in Co1 and Co2, in the union part and the international projects part. So next slide, please. So specifically, we'd like to show some examples about how we have projects. So we have running projects on connecting the European Union. And we'll start with the next one, that is pieces. So this project, in fact, is started in Co1 as the blue part that you can see, that was a study. And as mentioned before by Yorgos, so we can also fund the part of the preparatory studies. So this means desktop studies and marine ground survey and so on. So we started with call 1, the pieces cable system. And in the second call, a part that you can see in orange, that in fact should overlap with the blue one, is the works that is started and is to connect Ireland to France. So this is something that is going on, and we are looking for the results. So the coordinator is from Ireland, and we have a partner from France. Next one, please. And then addressing the needs from islands. So we have a C-spine. So this is a project from Call 2. And as you can see, the idea is really to link different islands between them in order to provide a better backbone infrastructure in this complex of islands. This is run in Greece by Greek partners, including the OT, that is one of the telecom operators, and the Ministry of Digital Governance. Next slide, please. And then going to the needs, addressing needs of overseas countries and territories, we have projects in Greenland. And those projects also start, so we have one part that started as a study, so that is a TUSUS Connect 1. And this, in fact, provided all the preliminary data and information that was necessary in order to start the deployment of works. So we have the second project, that's TUSUS Connected 2. It started this year and was selected in the Call 2. So this is a project, an example of a study that has gone into works deployment later on. So next slide, please. And then addressing also not only the needs of countries that have islands, but also the outermost regions. I'd like to mention the projects that are led by Canalink. So it's one entity who started in COE1 with the Canary subsea studies. And this is a comprehensive study project to provide the basis of several works, activities that can be carried later on. At the same time, they started this Gran Canaria Lanzarote Fuerteventura ring. So this is a ring, is a cable infrastructure that is really meant to provide a reliable and with a resilience infrastructure for the islands. And last call, they were also selected for a connection that will go between Hierro and Tenerife. So this is also something that will improve the connectivity in the islands and improve the resilience of the communications there. Okay, so everything here is in Spain, the Canary Islands. Okay. Next slide, please. And then I'd like to present some examples of the connectivity, so what we are funding, connecting the Union with other countries. So that means, well, with what we call the third countries. So next slide, please. So one example is ATMED Nador, digital gateway. And this, in fact, is a project that is embedded in a global project that's called Medusa. This ATMED Nador will connect Lisbon, Barcelona, Marseille to Nador in Morocco. So you see the different points that will be linked. And this is something that is run by a Spanish entity that is Afrix Telecom. So this is one of the examples. Another one is the following. Is via Tunisia. This is also a branch that will be integrated in the Medusa global project. So we fund some pieces of this global project. The coordinator is Orange. And the objective here is to connect Marseille in France to Bizerte in Tunisia. So this is, of course, is run in collaboration also with the Afrix in order to be embedded in the big project. And in this specific project, the Via Tunisia is the orange part that you see in the map that is being funded under CEF Digital contribution. And for the next one, please. We have a couple of projects that are run in the north part of Europe and connecting to other countries there. So the Northern EU Gateways is a study that started in COE1. And this is meant to study the possibilities and the preliminary steps for two cables, so the Sea Lion 2 and the FNF. So FNF is the far north fiber that we'll see in the next slide. So this one is really something to put the basis and not only to check how to connect to the Nordic countries, but also they want to be to go beyond this and to connect to the Asia. So this is something that was also mentioned, how that the current links, current connectivity to Asia is a bit a bottleneck. So you have several places that are really already been heavily used. And the objective of some of these projects that are running in the Nordic part of Europe is to look for passes through the Arctic part. So this one was also thinking about how to expand the connectivity and reach Japan. And the next one is exactly the Far North Fiber that I have just mentioned. They were selected in Code 2. And we are just funding a small part of this because the project, well, looking at the dimensions, as you can see in the map, is a very broad project and involving several countries and several parts of the world. But in the CEF Digital, we're funding just the part that is in the box, the FNF Euro 1. And this is something that is now being funded to connect, so to have some landing points in Norway Finland, and Ireland, and something that could be perhaps developed in the future in order to go beyond all these countries. And the next slide is the North Pole Fiber. So this is another initiative also to link, or so envisaging a possibility of linking to Asia. Currently, we fund a very small part of this, that is in Sweden, but they have big ambitions to go and also connect to other places. So this one is only in Sweden, but if we look at the different parts, we have possibilities of connecting Europe to international partners. And the next slide is to give you some hints where to find further information about the projects. As it was mentioned before, we fund currently 30 projects, so it's not, we don't have the time to go through all the different projects here. This was just a sample of some cases. We invite you to go to the funding tenders in portal where you can find more information about each one of the projects. We have also more details in the other maps with in the Hadeas Connecting Europe Facility website. And for the news related, for instance, to the upcoming calls and every other information about the funding results, you can follow us in LinkedIn and X. Okay? And for any additional question, you can also use the functional mailbox, the CEF Digital calls, where we'll be more than happy to address your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Karina. I guess we can move on to the next presentation now. So as I said in the beginning, it will be Peter Curran from DG Impact covering this part. So other programs funding connectivity, international connectivity. So Peter, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Raquel. Thank you for the invitation, and good afternoon, good morning to everybody tuning in. So my name is Peter Curran. I'm here from the Directorate General International Partnerships, which is leading on international cooperation with the countries in Latin America, Caribbean, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Asia and the Pacific. This is the DG which is acting upon the geopolitical ambitions of the Commission, and of course, as such, it requires a strategy. So if we move to the first slide, the name of this strategy is Global Gateway. Global Gateway is is an EU strategy to boost sustainable links all around the world. It's looking at its core to physical infrastructure, but of course to create the enabling environment around it as well. As you can see on the slide, it is a strategy with a commitment to mobilize up to 300 billion in investments between 2021 and 2027, and it's really a response to the growing infrastructure investment gap, which we heard from the colleagues from DG Connect. It has 5 investment priorities, and one of them is really about digitalization. And if we go to the next slide, this pillar on digitalization has specific objectives. It's really looking out to decrease the digital divide and to expand digital connectivity and digital infrastructure, do it in a resilient way and provide security and diversification to help the countries to build up their own digital sovereignty, to put the human-centric values at the center of this work, which means working towards an open and global and interoperable internet, and of course to contribute to the twin transition while looking not just to the infrastructure but the services on top of it, including research, innovation, and the Green Deal. Really, this sustainable offer, what Global Gateway provides, is in a Team Europe narrative. It's very important to work together with the EU member states, their development financing institutions, and of course, to bring in the private sector. All these digital infrastructures are very much capital intensive projects, and that's why we need to have everybody on board to be able to have the biggest impact on the world. If we go then to the next slide, I would just like to talk a little bit about what's included and what we are focusing on. So at the first point, there is international connectivity. As we have been seeing so far, this very much includes submarine cables and as well satellite connectivity. It's about connecting continents and regions together. And as well, from the moment we land the subsea cable at the country, it's important as well to pick that capacity up and go beyond the coastal countries to connect the landlocked countries. And therefore, we are focusing as well to investing in these regional backbones which interconnect these countries. And as well, a crucial element when we talk about infrastructures is data centers and internet exchange points, which we know that they are holding data. They are at the core for the user, for the people to access this data, and they can their proliferation can really decrease the prices for the end users, which is really contributing to our goal to have meaningful connectivity, which is also affordable for the people. Here as well, I have to touch upon that we focus on the green aspects of the infrastructure as well. So it's very important to us, for instance, when we look at data centers, that they are upholding the highest environmental standards. And then, of course, when we look within the countries, that's when we touch upon last mile connectivity, which is really about to reach rural areas, those which are unserved and underserved. So we really reduce the digital divide, which is so persistent in many of the countries of the global south. As you can see in the table on the slide, it really sums up a 360 approach, which means that at the core we have the infrastructure, but of course we have to ensure that this infrastructure is secure, it's using trusted vendors. And then of course we want to not just build infrastructure, but also to build on top, to support the building on top of services like e-services, data governance, and others. So the people can instantly benefit from the new infrastructure and connectivity rolled out in their area. Now, I would like to showcase just two examples of this approach. So on the next slide, you will see the first one, which you have heard about. I'm pretty sure this is Bella, which consists of the Ella Link, which is the first submarine cable connecting Europe to Latin America. And Bella is the name of the project which not just contributed to the creation of this subsea cable, but also worked with the research and education communities both in Europe and in Latin America towards interconnecting them and towards allowing for the proliferation of services in this regard. This project is still ongoing. It's in the second phase, which builds upon this connection to Europe and tries to expand it to other countries in Latin America. On the next slide, then we have another example of the global gateway approach, which is, as you have heard already, is a Medusa Mediterranean. This part, for instance, just to be more concrete, have seen an EU contribution of 40 million euros, together with 100 million euros of investment from the European Investment Bank, to the benefit of the research and education communities of the North African countries, not just to connecting them together, but also connecting them to Europe by securing a 200 gigabit dedicated capacity for this purpose. This then leads us to the last slide, and I'm passing through a little bit much more quicker because I know we are running out of time, to how we exactly finance these digital infrastructures. So the main instrument what we have at international partnership is called Global Europe. And there we have foreseen a allocation for the 7-year period, where we really would like to work with, and we are really working together with the European financing institutions and the member states to pool those resources together. The infrastructure investment gap is huge, and we know that development financing alone cannot make a difference. That's why, as you can see on the screen, I put an example there how it can work in real life. So we can leverage grant investments from our envelope to become an anchor customer, to provide capacity to public institutions, to connect schools, hospitals, government institutions, to green their infrastructure, which we can together with loan financing from the European Investment Bank or other DFIs, preparing a blended financing envelope. And as well, we can leverage other financial tools at our disposal, like the European Fund for Sustainable Development Plus, which actually provides guarantees for these financing institutions to de-risk their investment. We know that many of these countries and emerging markets are very volatile, and they have a higher risk associated with any type of investment. So what we try to do is really to provide these guarantees to encourage the financing institutions to go to these markets, to invest and bring the private sector together. This is the case with the Medusa Mediterranean, and this is the case what we are looking outwards and building an investment pipeline, including for subsea cables, but other terrestrial backbones and satellite connectivity as well. So I would conclude here from my end. Thank you really for the invitation, and happy to answer questions after the presentations.
Thanks a lot, Peter. Indeed, we are running a bit out of time, so let's move right into the next presentation, next and last presentation on outermost regions. So Eva and Ramunas, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Raquel. And my colleague Eva and I will try to outline very quickly of what and how cohesion policy contributes to the overall digital transition objectives, and also just try to give you additional angle of which is specific to the out regions. So next slide, if I may, please. This might be familiar to you, and also Franco already noted this at the beginning. So this is not to tell you what you already know, but just to show where the cohesion policies dimension in this. So you may have heard, and you of course certainly know, that the digital ambition and when it comes to connectivity targets was updated, revised it upwards. And all I want to stress on this slide is the word all, and that all European households to be connected and all populated areas to be covered by 5G. And I think that's where the challenge is. And because most of these investments to provide this connectivity is to be done by private operators, but of course that would be in an ideal world. It doesn't happen, and of course we still have gaps and white spots where such connectivity is not available, or it's not up to scratch and not sufficiently of a sufficient quality. So then of course public interventions is warranted, and that's where cohesion policy contributes. So in a way, if I rephrase it or portray it in a bit different way, so doing a bit of heavy lifting where market operators cannot deliver. Next slide, please. So it's as I said, it's a heavy lifting, and this is also requires a very good coordination between policies. So, and this is just to show you of how cohesion policy, and we operate with the so-called specific objectives, how cohesion policy specific objective, or SOs, as they are noted on the slides, how they overlap with the four elements, or the 4 points of a digital decade and digital compass. So when it comes to digital infrastructures, we have a dedicated specific objective, and under this specific objective, member states, because we're in shared management mode, so it's a discussion between member states and the Commission. Member states programmed 2.4 billion euros to support digital infrastructure. So that covers both fixed and mobile digital infrastructures. But also, despite in addition to the funding, what is also relevant here is that this planning needs to be precise and there shouldn't be any overlaps. And for this, cohesion policy has specific enabling conditions, which is relate to the national broadband plan, so that the planning process are aligned and that these investments are taking place where it's needed. So, and also when it comes to some institutional elements, so the so-called broadband competence offices are being supported. So we do require for any intervention that is supported by European funding or European Regional Development Fund that these investments are adhering to the requirement to have a national broadband plan, to have a requirement to undergo a specific planning and mapping exercise, to have the structures such as BCO in place. But so as I said, it's 2.4 billion contribution for this program period from 21-27. But in addition, and I think this is significant, the overall contribution of cohesion funding in this program period is in the area of 40 billion euros. So it's not all of it is for infrastructure. Infrastructure is at 2.4 billion, but also to stimulate demand, but also roll out new services, be it public administration services, or the so-called digitalization of public administration, or digitalization of businesses. That also encourages or makes the business case easier for operators when the demand for connectivity services grows. So in this domain, we are, as I said, putting all together around 40 billions, or member states planned 40 billions in investment. If I made just one small parenthesis, so the 2.4 billion for digital connectivity, that's in some, I think, more than half or 15 member states that planned such interventions and investments. But I want to tell you that, of course, similar investments are being planned under the Recovery and Resilience Facility. So some member states decided to do digital infrastructures supported by the RRF. Some of them support with ERDF, the Cohesion Policy funding. So that's basically it. And in my next slide, the last one is just an outline, just to show you that indeed, when it comes to different elements of a network, so this is just an annex, so it's very technical, but I think this is just to signify and to show you that cohesion policy interventions supported by the cohesion policy supports different elements. So backbone is one of them, indeed, but you can see local loop access networks, so all the elements that are required to promote digital connectivity in the EU. And with this, I will pass quickly to my colleague Eva. Eva, over to you.
Thanks, Ramonas, and hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. I know it's a bit difficult to be the last speaker before the lunch break, so please bear with me. I'm taking you to some exotic places, namely the outermost regions. So the EU has 9 outermost regions, and they're home to about 5 million people in the world. And I included a map here so you can visualize them a little bit, because probably many of you have never heard of them before or don't know exactly where they are. So we have Canary Islands, which belongs to Spain. Then we have the Azores and Madeira, which are part of Portugal. Then we have Saint Martin, Guadeloupe, Martinique in the Caribbean, French Guiana in Latin America, and Mayotte just off the coast of Madagascar, and then La Réunion in France. They're all part of France. So these regions are quite different from mainland Europe, and they're still part of the EU, so they still have the same rights and obligations that apply, which is also why the treaty recognizes their specific constraints, remoteness, for example, insularity, small size. And the Commission has designed or adopted multiple strategies over the past years to support these regions in their development. The most recent one was in 2022. So as you probably can imagine, connectivity plays a really big role in remote regions like the outermost regions, because it allows people living in these regions to participate in training, for example, or access public services, It supports businesses to offer their services irrespective of their location, also remote working. But of course, being remote and being islands mostly, except French Guiana, this also brings with it certain challenges. So one of them is submarine cables, like submarine cable dependency, also double insularity, for example. So the main island gets a connection, and the other islands don't, or only one cable, for example, and then you have less secure, less fast, less reliable connectivity. Then, of course, there's also very small markets in these regions, which makes private investment a bit more difficult because it's less interesting. You also have, of course, an economic fabric that is characterized by SMEs, really micro businesses, which don't always have the capacity to digitalize their services. So it's not just infrastructure, but also, of course, digital skills, which makes it a little bit more challenging. So the last strategy, we designed this in the wake of COVID-19. So of course, digitalization plays an important role in building resilient economies, inclusive societies. So this is really reflected in the strategy, and digital is a very, very big priority in the strategy. So the strategy includes recommendations both addressed to member states, but also regions and Commission commitments, and they all relate to infrastructure, but also digital skills development. So if you go to the next slide, very briefly on how the support to these regions looks like in practice. So we have, on the one side, we have the support at program level. So we try to make sure that relevant policies, programs take account of the specificities of these regions. So for example, commitments to territorial cohesion, connecting remote territories like the outermost regions as program objectives, but also mentions in award criteria, and very important, higher co-financing rates. So for example, they receive up to 70% co-financing rates under CEF, which is quite important. Then of course, the second element is that it's important that these regions also make use of these opportunities that are created. So that's also what we're trying to do. We help these regions seize these opportunities. We organized several thematic workshops. We have done a lot of bilateral exchanges in the past, meetings, and this has worked really, really well. And we've seen a huge increase in the number of successful applications from the outermost regions in the competitive calls, such as CEF, for example. And I also put one example here on the slides, which is one project that was jointly or is jointly funded by CEF and the ERDF to connect French Guiana via the LLIC cable to Europe, to the European continent. And then the last element of support that we offer to these regions is really in the form of promoting the participation of the regions in relevant networks, like, for example, the Broadband Competence Offices network. We had dedicated webinars in the past, and we also always try to disseminate information on upcoming webinars that are on topics that are important for these regions. So that's all from my side, and back to you, Akira.
Thank you so much. And I think I will just end, and I hope you no longer see my screen, or do you? I hope not. You still do.
We still do.
Okay, so I will stop sharing now. Perfect. So let's move, if you don't mind, let's move to the questions, because there were quite a few in the chat. Everyone understood the assignment, so let's try to move quickly to the questions. So just the first one, as the presentation of Peter was not so long ago, there was just a question, a clarification for you. In your presentation, you use EUFI. The person wants to know what you refer to precisely. Peter, if you can just clarify this point first.
Yes, of course, that's European financing institutions. So those financing institutions which are in the within the European Union.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Let's now move on to the next question. I think this one would be for Franco or Yorgos. So how is the EU trying to preserve a fair competition and a level playing field between European telco operators and the hyperscalers that are heavily investing? I don't know which one of you would prefer to take this one.
I'll try to take that because I guess there will be other for Georgios. Well, I mean, the question is very pertinent to connectivity in general, but not necessarily to submarine cables. Actually, I would like to invite the person who raised the question, but also every participant to look at what we are doing with the white paper, because the white paper is indeed an analysis of what are the main challenges today faced by connectivity. One of them is the fact that networks are more virtualized, cloudified, to say, or softwareized. So meaning that this can be very expensive for the telco operators to adapt to these new technological evolution. At the same time, these will, of course, put their current models under pressure. In particular, also, we see more and more a convergence between the so-called content application providers, who very often they are a scaler providing cloud connectivity, cloud hosting, etc., and the telcos. So, of course, the articulation between those segments, of course, follows market, let's say, evolution, market forces, market dynamics, I would say. However, of course, it is very clear that we have identified in the process of the white paper and before the white paper in our consultation that indeed, let's say, the hyperscaler, normally what is called the hyperscaler, or the content application providers are not subject to the same regulatory level and pressure that the telco sector has been facing for decades. And this creates a sort of imbalance. So in this converged world, we need really to review the regulatory layer. And that is the purpose of the white paper, to gather input. So I invite all of you to go there and provide your views and your input to this process, because indeed this is exactly, the question is very interesting because it is exactly pointing to what we are currently doing, beyond, of course, the scope of the submarine cable itself. I hope I answered. So it's more, rather than an answer because I cannot provide a solution, actually is a scope of consultation, is an invitation to everyone to go to the consultation page, which it will be, the consultation will be open until the end of June, and provide your input and your idea.
Thanks a lot, Franco. Okay, let's move on to a next question for Karina this time. Were any suppliers recently excluded from the CEF calls as a consequence of the communication on 5G security toolbox?
This is a very, let's say, sensitive question. I would just remind the security requirements and security restrictions that we have in the call. So in principle, as was already mentioned by Yorgos, only EU-controlled entities can participate and receive funding in the call. And moreover, there's also a constraint on the suppliers of technology that cannot be from third countries. So on top of this, depending on each of the project, we see also, we make sure that the beneficiaries are applying as much as possible, so as applicable as possible, the conditions of the 5G toolbox. Now, to say if there are some that have been blocked or not, I would say this is a little bit delicate as a question, but we apply the security restrictions in order really to make sure that we have a network that will result from the project as secure as possible.
Great, thank you so much. I think Yorgos has connection problems at the moment, so I will move on to a question for you again, Franco, if you don't mind. Only EU-controlled companies would receive EU money to deploy backbone connectivity in the future?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes. Would only EU-controlled companies receive EU money to deploy backbone connectivity in the future? So only those that are...
was I think already covered by Giorgio, saying, for instance, when we have to connect with the third country, there is some possibility, of course. I would not imagine that connecting to a third country means that necessarily the cable has to be, let's say, owned and controlled by the Europeans. I mean, by definition, this is part of collaboration, international collaboration. So also we need to ensure a certain uniformity also with the other EU funding programs. But on the supply, let's say there we are also. It's not only the ownership of the cable, but also the controllership, but also the supply of the equipment that are necessary. On that, I really invite to look at, to consult the relevant sections of the CEF Digital work program, where we provide specific constraints for participating to the program. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. And as Yorgos still hasn't managed to join, I think I'm just going to ask you the last one, Franco, and then we wrap up if that's okay. So, did the laws on critical infrastructure affect investments in the area of cables? So the laws on.
Okay, so first allow me to complement what my previous version. So when I said participation when we connect with the third country is possible, this is always subject of, however, to the provision of guarantees that have to be certified by the states to which the cables is connecting. So this is a guarantee. So it's not excluded the participation, but there must be a certain degree of certification that is also explained very well in the program and in the cable. I wanted to complement that. Sorry. The other question is about I think the more pertinent to the recommendation. Actually, we are trying to systematize, the topic. So far, it has not been, let's say, because of their nature, the cables basically are not really subject to specific regulations. So we had basically, or new regulation, I would say. So we had limited ourselves to a recommendation to the member states. In the recommendation, we articulate very well the collaboration between groups like the NIS2 and what we plan to create with the recommendation. We suggest to create, because it's a recommendation, as I said, which is the expert group that will identify the security requirements, possibly with the level of certification and labeling, as I mentioned in the slide, identifies the resilience gaps, and then based on that, we say we expect that the group will provide also input on what they consider the priorities to be funded. Of course, these will involve very much all the stakeholders, including the NIS2, for instance, or the group on the CER group on the critical infrastructures. And of course, it will be only an input. Of course, this is, for what the CEF is concerned, we are guided by the CEF regulation, first of all.
Okay, I know I said it was the last one, but I think maybe this will be the last one, Peter, for you, if you don't mind. It's on the ERDF. So it's just a question on if it's providing grants or loans. Maybe we can clarify this last point.
It's for ERDF. I will take it.
Rather be okay, sorry. Then not
No
for you.
worries.
Sorry.
No, yes, we are very generous, and we are talking about the grants.
Okay, very short reply. So we can now end this session. Okay, I want to thank everyone, the speakers, the audience, the technical team who made this possible and makes it possible every time. Thank you so much for attending. So as I said in the beginning, this was supposed to be the last of a series on CEF Digital, last session, but we will have one exceptional last one on the 11th of June, again on 5G, but with experts from the field. So make sure you tune in on the 11th of June with us. And on this note, I wish you a nice afternoon and we'll see you next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.